This is Sola Veritas. Theology without fluff. Doctrine without the filter. No hot takes, TikTok theology, or 5 steps to a better you. That's not this. Welcome to the deep end of the pool. Historic, biblical, and bold. This is not your grandma's podcast. Only truth. Warning. Podcast contents may cause spiritual growth and minor offense.
Welcome back to the Sola Veritas Podcast. My name is Justin. I'm one of your hosts with my friend Nathan.
Welcome.
And Matt.
What's up, guys?
And we are on episode 19. 19.
That's crazy.
We are closing in. This is not the season finale. Our next episode will be the season finale, but we're basically at the end. Hey,
I don't know what's crazier,
1.
that we've made it 19 episodes or that it's taken us 30 weeks to record 19 episodes.
We've had to re-record some.
Well,
we've had to,
it's been some growing pains.
There's some growing pains. Yeah.
Some unplugged mics.
Wow.
That was rough. All right. What we got going on for today's show, Matt?
All right. So we are continuing our conversation on the attributes of God. So we want to wrap out the season with just focusing on those final attributes. So today's episode is going to be on the immutability of God and just what that unchanging nature looks like.
Great topic.
What the unchanging nature of God reveals to us in our lives as Christians, and then just as a whole, what it means for the church and for Christians as they move forward through this world. So let's, as we always do, let's walk through, define the seminary word for the kids. What is the immutability of God? I almost want the new...
all right, the brand
I haven't
new
had it
seminary.
Okay.
Go for it.
God doesn't change.
Yeah. Done. Yeah. Absolutely. God doesn't change. If we were to take all of God's attributes, the way that it would be best understood is that eternality, which is another one of God's incommunicable attributes. God's eternality is the span of time of his character and his person. Immutability is the fluctuation of his character. Well, there is no fluctuation of his character. There's no shadow of turning with thee. All of his attributes are at 100% all the time, and he is unchanging in all of those attributes, meaning there's never going to be a time where God chooses mercy over justice, or justice over mercy, or love over wrath, or wrath over love, or anything like that. All of his attributes are fully present and viewable at all times. And in those attributes, God himself does not change. That means there's no waxing or waning with the character of God or any of his attributes.
Yeah, I think that's really key to understanding God just in general, but it's also very difficult to understand because, as we've had with many of the other things we've talked about, it's not a human approach to the world, right?
No.
Like when I go throughout my day, there are parts of my day where I am kind of mellow. There's parts of my days where I'm amped up. There's parts of my days where I can get frustrated at something.
That's right.
And then 20 minutes later be happy and laughing about something.
And then I kick the cat.
And then, and so my emotions wax and wane and change throughout the day based on the circumstances around me. And so to understand that God in his eternality in everything about him, every attribute about him is on full display at all times. It's a difficult concept to wrap your minds around because it's not something that we ever experience on this side of eternity.
Yeah, and as you said, this is a foreign concept to humanity because we are not immutable. We change constantly. We change not just from hour to hour, but day to day, month to month, year to year. Our character grows or diminishes based on our actions. And so Immutability is a incommunicable attribute of God, meaning that it is not communicated or transferred to us in any way, shape, or form. Even in the person of Christ, God is still immutable. There are those who have contemplated, well, doesn't God change in the person of Jesus? No, he adopts to himself unfallen humanity. The nature of God, the ousia of God, does not undergo a change. That's why in the Athanasian Creed we confess that both the nature of God and the nature of man dwell within the singular person of Christ bodily, unmixed, unconfused. And so there's no change to the actual nature or person of God, even in the incarnation.
Yeah. So how does this then, how would we say that the immutability of God safeguards the trustworthiness of God?
Come on, brand new seminarian.
Well, man, I had to answer this in like one of my first discussion posts.
There you go.
We love discussion posts.
For those who don't know, if you do online classes, especially at seminary, you have a lot of discussion posts, and we should all look at the camera and say, "We love discussion."
We love
discussion
discussion
No, those are
posts.
terrible. Discussion posts are terrible. I anathema.
They're not terrible. I just think they need to be labeled something other than discussion post. I
The
think
worst
they need to
part-
be labeled as opinion and answer post, because that's what you do is you put 300 words down, somebody responds,
Yeah.
and then you say, "Hey, that's a great response," and then you're done.
That or well, we need to stop with the whole, because this is basically the formula. You need to compliment or say what you did wrong in your discussion post, and then you have to. Nathan's in this right now, so this is.
I always felt bad being that guy, because I like everybody would type out, "Oh, I thought you did a great job with this post. This is so good."
Did you consider?
And I would always put, I'm like, "Hey, so I really think that your approach here was in contrast to the text, and you should really go back and reread the text and consider what you're talking about."
Bro, this is definitely inside baseball, but Nathan actually got points off for being too harsh on somebody.
What? Did you?
I
I'm just
definitely
learning this
said
right
it
now.
in a way
That's
that I
awesome.
didn't need to say it, but
You Matt Meredith. That's awesome. We have a
It
phrase
was
in our,
over.
in
What
our
was
house.
it? Over Ephesians 2 or Ephesians 1?
yeah, Ephesians 2,
And-
1 through 10.
And
Your
the
tone
dude
was too harsh.
and the dude was like, apparently the dude was like, yeah, this doesn't matter to the narrative of the gospel. Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
just I definitely said it in a way that I didn't need to say it.
Anyway, that
Anyway,
was
if
a
you had
rabbit
been
trail.
immutable, then
And
you
me-
would
yeah,
That's true.
have
I couldn't-
that wouldn't have happened. All right,
Bringing it
Nathan,
back.
what-
Let's go.
What is immutability?
Okay, so
and how does that safeguard?
with God remaining unchanging, that means every truth about him and from him remains unchanging as well. So when the scriptures are infallible, the truth there remains unchanging. So we can read the Bible and say, okay, there's one truth always.
Yeah.
Because there's only ever one truth from this text, because God isn't changing what the text is meaning for the context of it. Now, there are different applications, and that can vary, but the principle of the text, according to my textbook is the way to put it, does not change. Yeah. And it will not change because God in his truth is unchanging at the same time.
Absolutely.
Right.
Would you ask a question again?
Oh, how does the immutability of God, how does that understanding of that attribute of God safeguard his trustworthiness?
Yeah. To piggyback off of you, because I was like, what question are we answering again? I can't remember everything.
We definitely practice this ahead of time.
Yes. It also safeguards his trustworthiness because, alluding to the scriptures, you can actually trace the promise of God. If you can't trace the promise of God and the fulfillment of those promises, then he is not one that can be trusted at all. Well, and here's the reality. If God does change, you can't trust him. He is no better than the gods of Egypt. He's no better than the gods of Rome. And he's no better than the gods of your own heart.
Yeah. So let's have the textual conversation for a second, because this is obviously an area where
This This is Matt's favorite question.
This is my favorite question. And I say that because I want to be very kind, because I was teaching our Sunday school.
Yes.
And got caught in a moment where my attributes definitely changed. But I got caught in a moment because someone had a different translation than
NASB 1995.
than the translation that I had studied from. And so when we were teaching through Exodus 32, if you are reading through that passage, it actually says in ASB 95, and I've got it pulled up so that we can see it, in verse 14, as
chapter 32, verse 14.
Chapter 32, verse 14, Moses has come down from the mountain. They've seen the people that are in revelry. We'll see. They're partying.
That's a nice word to say.
And
with one another.
And God has said he's going to destroy them.
Yes.
Moses intercedes, and verse 14 in this translation says, "So the Lord changed his mind about the harm which he had said he would do to his people." And so for me, this was not the translation that I had studied from. And so I'm up in front of our Sunday school, and I ask the question that I think is a very quick and easy answer. I say, okay, so does God change his mind? And someone in the
disaster occurs.
someone said, yes, he does. And
Yeah.
I said, okay, like, let's have the conversation. Why do you say that? And they said, because my Bible said so. And I, like, all the blood rushed out of my body. I was instantly just was shocked because I was not ready for someone to say, because my Bible says so. And so since then, we've been able to have conversations and walk through that. But I think it's important to understand that there are translations out there that say God changed his mind. I mean, it in the words, the Lord changed his mind.
Yeah.
And so how do we address that?
Yes. So we recently just talked about this with the young adults over this passage in particular about whether or not does God change his mind.
And this will, I think, just to give people, this will tie back to when we talked about how to read your Bible and we talked about different translations and faithful translations and all of that. Go back and reference that episode for some of what we're about to talk about.
This is also going to tie in with our episode on omniscience. So one of the first things we have to kind of grapple with a text like this, when God relents or God changes his mind, according to NASB 95, is does God know all things? Well, yes, he's omniscient. He knows all things exhaustively. He knows all things eternally. He knows all things as matter of fact, and he is the driving force behind all things. If he doesn't foresee it, it doesn't occur, right? If something happens that he doesn't foresee, he can't be God. And so he knows exactly what's going on in Exodus 32. He knows exactly what's going to occur, how Moses is going to respond, what he's gonna say, all these things. The NASB 1995, what it does is it takes an emotive term, a term of emotion, that is meant to articulate a deep sigh, and they turn it into a verbal form of a word. And that verbal form of the word is to change one's mind.
Sure.
That is not what the text is trying to communicate. That's why the NASB 2020 has been updated also to relent. The relenting is the emotive of that deep sigh. God's not changing anything. How can we contend with that? Here's why that actually matters. If we say that God changes his mind in the text from this passage, that means God didn't know everything because he's acquired new information and he's changed his tactics. So either God is immutable and is immutable in his knowledge, and what he knows doesn't change, or God isn't immutable, God doesn't know everything, and he is veiled from the knowledge of the future, and therefore he is adjusting with the course of history. I said in our omniscience episode We don't have a sovereign dice roller. He's not hoping for snake eyes at the craps table. Right? And so God has to be immutable. Even in this moment, he has to be immutable. Why? Because his people are sinful. His people are stiff-necked. And if he changes like they change, they have no hope. Ultimately, if God changes his mind, even in this situation, that has implications for our salvation. If God can change his mind even in this moment, that means he can change his mind about our salvation later.
Yeah.
And
that's a scary thing.
Yeah. And that means if he destroys the people of Israel in this moment, he is not upholding his promise to Abraham or to Isaac or to Jacob. And so he becomes a very untrustworthy God if he can change like we can change.
Yeah, I think I've kept the translation up in 95 because I wanted to see how Malachi 3 put this, because Malachi 3:6 says, "For I, the Lord, do not change."
Yeah.
And so again, just as an aside of faithful translations and people constantly reviewing and looking, that's one of those areas where people would look in previous translations and say, hey, there's a conflict in our translation here.
Yeah.
There's one verse where we're saying God changes and another verse where God clearly says, I don't change.
That's right.
So how do we reconcile that? And they reconciled it by understanding what you talked about of, we've translated this poorly to express what, again.
And a single word challenges the doctrine of the immutability of God. What were you going to say?
I'm going to pick on your Hebrew. Do you know if those are different words?
From Malachi to... I don't know if those are different words.
Okay, I'll look later.
Just pull up the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah, just pull up the Hebrew Bible. Give me 20 minutes. I'll figure it out for you.
Okay, so we've walked through that, and that's probably the most difficult conversation surrounding God's immutability, because people want to say God changes his mind here, God changes his mind there. I mean, you use that, you'll have that argument in even covenant theology where people will say, well, God said he was going to destroy the earth, and then he didn't. He saved people. God said he was going to kill Adam and Eve, and then he didn't. He saved people. God said that, in Exodus, God said he was going to wipe everybody out, and then he didn't. They still wander around the wilderness.
There are even texts where it says that God repents.
Right. And
which is,
so,
again, an emotive term, not verbal.
So you have all of that where people will challenge this understanding by saying, look at these areas where it appears that God changes his mind. And so...
real fast, even culturally, what do people say? From the Old Testament to the New Testament, God changes. Right? God's mean and vindictive and all this other stuff. And then, happy fluffy boyfriend Jesus. So, but even culturally, people think that.
Well, that's the question I was leading to. So, there you go. Just keep on that line of thought. How does immutability?
You jumped the gun, Justin.
No, it's fine. How does his immutability keep us, or help with keeping the gospel from cultural drift? Because there's that tendency of, well, did Jesus really say? Did God really say?
Yeah.
And we shift slightly to happy fluffy boyfriend Jesus.
Yeah, but it's the lie of the enemy from Genesis chapter 3. Did God really say? Well, let's tack on to that. Is God really this? Is God really trustworthy? Is God faithful? Is God these things? You say he said these things, but you don't believe that. You don't believe that by your actions. And so one of the ways that God's immutability safeguards the gospel from cultural drift is that it is the same gospel today, yesterday, and forever, just as Jesus Christ is the same today, yesterday, and forever. If God changes, we don't have a trustworthy good news. And so God's character is, I don't want to say at stake. Nothing's at stake with God. But God's character is on full display in the gospel, and he safeguards it by the fact that by two unchangeable things, whether it's impossible for God to lie, and by that it's impossible for God to lie, is sworn by his own name, well then the gospel is certain, and regardless of how the culture wants to combat us, it's not going to change.
So comment section guy.
Mm-hmm. We see you.
Yeah. How do you address that sounds fine and good.
Yeah.
But we can go back through history and see that God's plan actually adapts as history changes.
Can I
go for it
really fast? Not to that. I'm gonna not to that
okay.
question.
Oh,
but
come on.
I just want to make a really quick point. I was thinking about this and I was like, man, God being unchanging also means you don't get the cultural cop out when you don't like what Paul says.
Oh, yes. Well, that was cultural then. No.
Deep into the pool, kids.
You don't get to do that.
If you're like, oh well, female preachers, that was just the culture then. No.
Subscriber count just went down. All right. What was your question again?
That was just bothering me. I was like, we're talking about culture. Now, the culture's going to change, but you don't get to say that God's word changed because the culture changed.
I thought it was a good point. It's a great point.
You're good. So yeah, if we comment section guy says it's a good theory or a good good thought, but if you look back through history, you can actually see God's plan changing as it unfolds, adapting to history as it unfolds.
No, that's ludicrous. Deep word, ludicrous. It is. That is. I need to find another good word for ludicrous. That's laughable at best. Here's how. Genesis chapter 3. What does God promise? The seed of the woman will crush the head of the serpent. Well, if God's plan adapts with history, how does He know that?
Yeah.
If God's plan is dependent on us not making sure we follow everything rightly, God's taking a big risk, right? Or His promise to Abraham. What does He tell him? You're gonna have a land. You're gonna have a nation. You're gonna have a people more numerous than the stars of heaven. Oh, by the way, you're gonna go down into a nation that's not yours and be slaves there for 400 years. What happens?
Exactly
that. Exactly that. Exactly
it's
that.
Almost like He knew.
and so, if God changes with the rolling out of history, God's a liar. Okay. Because He says He declares the end of all things from the beginning. He's the author of history, which means He's writing it, not you.
Well, so then that brings in the other side of the objection, which is God's writing the story.
Yeah.
But it's a choose your own adventure, and it depends on
interactive Netflix.
It depends. That's right. It depends on our faithfulness. It depends on what I choose, where I go, what I do, whether or not God's plan unfolds the way that it's supposed to.
I would say no, because God uses even our sinful acts in accordance with His own plan. Judas is the perfect example. Jesus is the Savior of the world. He's going to save His people from their sins. Judas betrays Jesus into the hands of the Pharisees and gets him killed, gets him crucified. If it's a pick your own adventure story and God's adapting, well, God's got to figure, how is this going to work? No, he prophesied it through the prophet Isaiah in Isaiah 53 that He would crush His son.
Yeah.
And so, Judas, you're playing your part. You're not throwing a wrench into God's plan. You're a cog in the machine.
I really want to get into a side conversation, but I think we're going to save that for the next episode, because the next episode's going to, I don't know how we're getting the next episode really needs to be a two-parter, but
no, we got this.
We're not going to do it. That's fine.
We'll shove it into 30 minutes.
So let's wrap out this episode.
All right.
With two questions. One, how does, I'll do it this way. How is the security of our salvation rooted in the immutability of God?
Nathan, why don't you take that one?
All right. When God gives you His Spirit, and His Spirit is there indwelling you, God's not going to say, you know what? I made a bad decision. I'm like, shoot, gone. You'll figure it out. Maybe I'll give it back to you. Maybe I won't. Once God places His Spirit in you, adopts you to Himself, and says, you are mine, that's it. It's not going to change. And you may suck sometimes. The Spirit's still there, and eventually He's going to kick you back on track. But God is not changing His mind about who He has saved because of what they're doing, because then it would be salvation by works. He has decided, you are mine. I have called you a son. You are an heir with Christ. My Spirit lives in you. And when I come back, I'm going to see my Spirit, and I'm going to judge you according to the works of Christ, and you will be mine for eternity.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
No, that's really good. I think that, Justin, when you were talking about this the other day, you put out a really good point that if God is omniscient, God knows all, the only way that we change our minds when we talk about, I thought a certain way and then I changed my mind. Well, it's because I came into some new information, right? I suddenly had a new understanding, or I found an article, or somebody and I had a conversation and I thought about something a different way that I'd never thought about before. So that's where I changed my mind. God knows everything from beginning to end. And so when He called you to salvation, your point, He knew all of the stupid things you were going to do, and He still called you and still wants to use you and still wants that relationship with you, wants you to be part of His elect.
Yeah.
And so that's never going to change. He's never going to be surprised by something that you did one day.
And for those of you who are listening, you're probably beginning to realize how interconnected all of these incommunicable attributes really are. God's eternality, God's immutability, God's omniscience, God's omnipotence, all of these things are at play all the time. There's never a moment where one portion of God's incommunicable attributes is placed on mute.
Yeah.
And so all these things are happening all the time, right? God knows all things. He knows all things about you. And so when He's called, like you said, He's called you into His service, He's raised you with Christ. Yeah, He knows all your junk. If God's not immutable, then He might acquire new information and then change His mind about you.
Yep.
But because He is omniscient, and because He is immutable, and because His actions are immutable, boom, He's going to call you into eternal service.
So we've kind of danced around the last question here, but I want you to wrap us out with just what assurance does this give the believer who, especially the believer, I mean, you can say just believers in general, what assurance does this give? I think we've covered that a little bit, but especially to the believer who's struggling with their faith, who's sitting there today going, I don't know that I am worthy. I don't know that I can live out the Christian life.
Sure. What I would say is there's a few parables that talk about basically the great banquet of heaven, where God has sent out, or the Master has sent out invitations, and those who were the Jews rejected, right? I've got to feed my cow, and I've got to get married, I got to go bury my father, and all these other things. Which, side note, those were excuses for not being able to go to war, but neither here nor there. And so, what does the master of the house do? He says, "All right, go out to the highways and the byways, to the nasty places, and bring them, fill my house." And so, what did the servants do? They do it, and they say, "There's still room," and he says, "Continue to do that. Continue to bring in." They don't have the proper clothing, but they have an invitation. And so that means when they get there, they're actually given the proper clothing. They're given the righteousness of Christ. They're given the righteousness of the house. And they're in proper adornments. They have an invitation. They're there as guests, right? Our immutable God has done that to us in the gospel, where He has sent out His invitation in His Son. Go out into the highways, go out into the byways. Go and get my people. Fill my house. That's what the Son has done. He's not going to rescind His invitation to you. Yes, do we have to walk in obedience? Absolutely. Absolutely, we have to walk in obedience. But remember that your invitation is signed, sealed, delivered by the Son of God to you for you to enter into the Father's house and to dwell with the Father for eternity. And when you arrive on that day, whatever that day may be, you will receive in full what God has promised. Why? Because God is immutable. So if you're struggling, cling to that parable. I've received the invitation from God. I have accepted the invitation, and I'm going to make it all the way to the end. Not because of my works, but because He has invited me.
All right, y'all. I'm remembering how to do the outro. That was Sola Veritas with the second to last episode before we're done. We'll see y'all next week.
See you guys.
Thanks for diving into the deep end. If this helped you think, wrestle, or grow, share it. Subscribe, leave a review, and send it to someone who's ready for more than just surface-level faith. Warning: podcast contents may cause spiritual growth and minor offense.